It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Alan Pugh.
Am I on? Can you hear me? Okay, you can hear me. We're trying to figure this out. I feel like Madonna. Here. Okay, now I think I'm completely and totally electronic. I'm really glad to be here this evening. I can't imagine. I think you probably would rather hear the kids come back up and sing, which, I truly enjoyed that. Are they going to come back up before we're done tonight? They are, good. I'm looking forward to hearing them sing. I have been involved in Christian schooling for a long time. I began attending a Christian school in 1963. It gives you an idea how old I am. I was a freshman in high school, and as I shared at the Grandparents' Day on yesterday, the reason why I'm here tonight, more than any other reason, is because of what happened during that 4 years as a high school senior, the impact that was made in my life by the teachers, the administrators, and all the people that were involved in Christian schooling. So I want to share a little bit about my journey. I want to share a little bit about what I've learned over the years in terms of working with Christian schools, in Christian schools, and watching the impact that a quality Christian school can make in the life of a young person. But I want to kind of start with a story about a good friend of mine, good friends, Roger and Mary Humpton. Roger is probably my best friend in the world. He serves on my board of the Barnabas Group. In fact, he serves as chairman of my board. I met Roger, back in 1984. I was pastoring a Baptist church at that time in addition to being head of the Christian school. And after preaching one Sunday morning, Roger walked up to me, and he was the kind of guy who came to church in blue jeans and a t-shirt. He had just started his own construction company. He was pretty straight-spoken, and he looked me in the eye and he said, "Look, you're always talking about this discipleship thing. Would you disciple me?" And I kind of looked at him, and what does the pastor say? No? I said, "Well, Raj, that's an interesting request. I'll tell you what, let's meet at Denny's on Tuesday morning at 6 o'clock. We'll talk about this disciple thing." I figured that anybody who would get up early enough to meet me at Denny's. Denny's. Anybody own a Denny's here? Anybody who'd get up at 6 o'clock to have breakfast at Denny's with me had to be pretty serious about wanting to be discipled. So we met at 6 o'clock that Tuesday morning, and I had no idea. I'd never discipled anybody in my life. See, it's really easy to talk about discipleship as a theory. It's a lot more difficult to do it in reality. And so we met. I looked at Roger. He said, "What are we going to do?" I said, "Well, here's what you're going to do. You're going to read the first chapter of the book of Proverbs." I couldn't think of anything else to do. He's a business guy. I said, "Read the first chapter of the book of Proverbs and write down any questions, any observations you have. And bring them back next Tuesday. We'll talk about it." And I figured I was smart enough that I was smarter than him, and I could have an answer for any question he would raise. And he came the next Tuesday morning, and he had a notebook, and it was filled with pages of questions. And he asked me a question, and I went, "Good question. Let me think about that a bit. I'll go home and we spent 2 years, Tuesday mornings at 6 o'clock, studying 31 chapters of the book of Proverbs. And I guarantee you I learned a lot more about the book of Proverbs in those 2 years than Roger did. We're going to talk about what Solomon has to say about how we educate our children out of the book of Proverbs. But during that time, we were talking at the table tonight. Roger and Mary and my wife and I became very good friends. We traveled together, did vacations together. I watched his kids grow up from little tykes. About 6 years ago, his youngest son, David, who was working for him, he graduated from college, come back, was working for his dad, and he walked into the house one day and he said, "Dad, I need to let you know I joined the Army today." He joined the Army. I'm going to be in Special Forces. Sure enough, David went through all the training, Ranger training, Special Forces training, and was as well prepared to fight in a war as anybody can ever be prepared as a member of the United States Armed Forces. And a little over a year ago, David was deployed to Afghanistan. I happened to be in Delaware at the time, talking with Roger and with Mary. David was down in North Carolina, getting ready to deploy. And I remember sitting around their dinner table one night, watching Mary weep, as any mother would do, knowing that her son was about to go into harm's way. Watching Roger do everything he could do not to weep, knowing he felt exactly the same way. You may have had that experience. There's no pain quite like the pain a parent experiences when their child, their son or their daughter, is going to be put in harm's way. Now, the story ends well. David spent his time in Afghanistan. It was a difficult time, but he came home healthy and alive to the excitement of his parents. I remember when he first visited them. I wasn't there, but I got a telephone call from Roger and Mary telling me that he'd come home safe. It got me thinking, though, about some research that I've been studying over the last several years. And here's what the research is telling us about our kids. And it's pretty extensive research at this particular point in time. But the research tells us that somewhere between 50 and 70% of the young people who graduate from high school while attending an evangelical church, between 50 and 70% of those kids who go off to college or university will abandon their